drive change on an institutional level. You have policy, but without the story, without the heart, without the empathy behind it, it's absent of real change. See, that's what we believe in, and we understand as financial stewards, that's one of our main pillars. We know that it's a pressing time financially, and we know that every dollar that goes towards student fees is not going towards your textbooks, your rent, and the other essentials. Vote for a Christian. Listening is a choice. Let Christian uphold your voice.
Alrighty. Candidate Hill, your opening statement.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Kyle Hill, and I'm running for Speaker of the Senate this year for 2020. I, too, have a vision for CSU and this campus. Recently, in recent dates, things have been going on at CSU that does cause stir and controversy. And I want to be that candidate to address all your concerns. And I want to be that candidate to be there for everybody. I don't just want to be some Speaker of the Senate. I want to be your friend. And I want to be there to help you, help me, to help you. If you vote for me, I promise you that we will get things done. We will work together and we'll bring a unified structure of CSU. We will work with administration to make sure that all your student fees are going to the right direction, and we will work together to make sure everything gets done. Vote for Kyle 2020. Thank you.
Candidate Reyes, your opening statement.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tristan Reyez. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a fourth-year social work major here, and I'm running to be your Speaker of the Senate for Associated Students of Colorado State University. My campaign, yes, is also built on a vision, but it's built on something more core, values that represent all students on this campus. It's evident that students don't feel heard, they don't feel represented, they don't see themselves in student government. As a queer person of color, I know all too well what it's like being on this campus and feeling underrepresented, not heard, like I'm out of place, having imposter syndrome. I want student government to be a place where you can come and we can serve you, where students of all races, all genders, sexualities, identities can be heard, can feel respected. Diversity and inclusion is not just a buzzword for me, it's something I live every single day. Vote Tristan 2020. Thank you.
And Candidate Taddei's opening statement.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Taddei. I am an interior architecture and design major here at CSU, and I'm not going to be redundant. I'm here to implement positive change. I will never make promises that I cannot keep. I will be efficient and compassionate with everything that I do, and I promise that. Thank you.
Moving on to questions for the candidates. This one's going to be for all candidates, and that is top 3 issues that students are facing. Let's begin with Candidate Reyes.
I would say the top 3 issues that that students are facing on this campus today is systemic racism, is inequality in student fees and tuition, and as well as feeling heard in the classroom. It's very important that we as student leaders address systemic racism on campus, because race fatigue and feeling like you don't belong on this campus is a chronic issue that we've seen evidenced year after year after year, and the administration has made promises that they've not followed through on. And I really believe that we as students can listen and sit down with the populations that are being affected on this campus and find effective solutions to those problems with administration, with students together.
Today, your answer to that same question?
I believe that the issues that students are facing today, at least in our current day and age, is, first of all, COVID, right? This is our everyday thing. We walk around and we see each other, our community, wearing masks. Now, that's a very important thing to address. Another thing, fees that aren't necessary. As students, we are already financially struggling, and it is not necessary to have so many fees, and that is something that should also be addressed. Third, socially, I believe, dearie me. Can I continue? Can we pass? Sorry.
Time.
Thank you.
All righty, Candidate Dykson.
Thank you. I think it's an important question, and I just want you to know that I hear you. And part of our commitment as a campaign is that we want to hear the needs of students. And that's why we interviewed 7 students from all walks of life, from different countries, from different parts of our campus. And we asked them the same questions. Do you feel heard, and how can I help you? And it's obvious that we're living in a global pandemic right now that's testing us in more ways than we can imagine. I'm sure you're feeling it right now. I'm sure the challenges have been enormous with feeling heard and feeling connected. So I think COVID and absolutely this racial injustice and the racial tensions, and it stems back to this idea of, are we truly loving others? See, because I understand that love is a verb, and I understand that you live it out. And I know that with those, the feeling of anonymity, I want you to feel known. It's easy to keep your mic and your camera off. I want you to feel known.
All right, Candidate Hill.
Thank you. The three top issues facing students today are A, COVID-19, the pandemic. Whether students feel safe on this campus. Are they worried they're going to be sent home? Are they worried they're going to be the next outbreak? I want to address that. Make sure everyone wears a mask. Make sure everyone has a mask and it's affordable. 2, student fees. We want to get that lowered. In tuition, we want to get that lowered. We're not having the same services as we did before. Vote for me, I will make sure we will get that done. Thirdly, the systemic racism problem on campus. That has been an issue for many years and many months, and I'm afraid it will happen more to come. Vote for me, and we will get it down. We will work together to make sure that people are heard and everybody's voices are heard. Thank you.
Another question for all of the candidates. How do you plan to support student engagement in the upcoming U.S. election? Let's start with candidate Dykson.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would love to invite anyone who's watching right now to ask yourself, why do we vote? Why do we vote in elections? What does it mean to be civically engaged? What does it mean to know that you can make change on a national level, on a local level, even here with student government? What does that mean for you? Because I have no doubt that when you go to the ballot, it's going to be your motive, your inspiration, and your desire that brings you there. So my mission and my message is going to be, how can we find what's within you, the power within you to make change, and how can we release it in the form of civic engagement? Because we know that's what drives change. It's not what I say, it's what you do, and I'm going to invite you into that.
Same question for candidate Hill.
Thank you. I believe elections are a vital part of our society and what makes us a democracy. Now, during this time, there's a lot of partisanship, a lot of controversy, and I want to bring everybody unified together into one cause, into serving each other and make sure everybody is together. Elections isn't about getting what you want. It's about what you can do for others. Like John F. Kennedy says, ask not what I can do for you, ask not what someone can do for you, but ask what you can do for them. I want to do that. I want to make sure that gets done. That's how I see elections. Thank you.
Reyes, your response?
So my response to the question of how I'll get students engaged in voting this November, I'm working with the Colorado Student Government Coalition. As the chair of that coalition, I have been in contact with the Secretary of State's office. They're forming a statewide committee looking at how to get students engaged, how to get them in voting, understanding how to vote, when to vote, what methods you can vote, and all of the aspects of voting this November, and making sure we have informed students who we know on a national level are underrepresented in the census, underrepresented in voting on a local and national level. So I'm hoping to work with that group to table, to announce, to post, to really make sure that students are aware of their rights and that they can get mail-in ballots, that they can vote in person if it's safe for them. So I'm really hoping to do that as far as the election goes.
And today?
Voting is a right. It is a personal choice, and it is a privilege that we thankfully get to take part of. As for encouraging student engagement, I would use my platform to spread this message and to increase involvement, accessibility, and to empower our community to go out and vote, because like I said, it is an amazing privilege.
Thank you. Moving on to a candidate-specific question. Kyle Hill, why do you feel that Greek life organizations should get representation in the Senate, and won't that lead to double representation for students in Greek life and therefore make their voices more important and prominent?
Thank you for that question. I believe Greek life is an essential part of campus. There's too much of this stigma on campus, like Greek life, all they do is party all the time, and they do this or they do that. They do drugs, they do alcohol. That is not true. As the only candidate on this stage who is involved in some way, shape, or form within Greek life, I know what it's like to be in a brotherhood. And no, it will not give them a double representation on the Senate. There are lots of seats within the Senate. There's SDPS offices. There's all the colleges. I think Greek life is an important part on campus, and they should be heard. They are an essential part, and they instill amazing values of brotherhood, which they deserve to be heard. Thank you.
All right, just a couple of reminders for the debate. If you go past your time, you're allowed to finish your sentence, but please, to ensure fairness for all candidates, finish once your time is over. Candidates can again rebuttal if they want to by raising their hand, and you can still submit questions on YouTube in the live feed comment section. Moving on to another general question for all the candidates. What is your organizational or leadership style, starting with candidate Taddei?
I work for the people. My leadership style has always been, come to me with what you can do best, and I will do best with that. It's simple, it's sweet. I want people to shine in what they believe they can shine in. Thank you.
Dykson?
Yeah, thank you for that question. When I step into a room, I don't want it to be me consuming the time or consuming the energy or the conversation. I want it to be focused on you. And that's the way that I live my life. When I see somebody, it's not, oh, here I am, it's there you are. I want to hear your story and I want to know how I can support you. That is my leadership style. I believe if we look at ASCSU as a whole, what's the purpose? When you go onto the website at ASCSU, does it say join ASCSU or does it say we want to hear your story? Because I promise you, I will give you the latter. I'm going to ask you that question, and that's my leadership style, is entirely outreach focused. Less of me, more of you. That's how we bring success and healing for our campus.
Candidate Reyes?
I would say my leadership style is best described by servant leadership. This is a concept that says, if you will come to me with an idea, I will give you the resources to make that idea real. I will connect you with people on campus, with student government leaders, leaders at the state and national level to be able to implement these programs. When I sit down in a room and I am leading, am I chairing, whatever I'm doing, I want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard equally, that we're making sure that diversity and inclusion isn't just having someone at the table, that it's listening to their voice, that it's making sure they're understood, and I repeat that back to them to make sure I'm comprehending what they're telling me. So that's how I would say I would lead.
Hill?
Unity is strength. That is my biggest platform. That is what my values are in a leader. I want to unify everybody. I want to make sure everybody understands what it is to be a CSU Ram, no matter your skin color, no matter your gender, your sexual orientation, your identity, any identity you have, you are a CSU Ram and you are represented. We should all put aside our differences and come together. And if you vote for me, I want to be that speaker that will do that, not cause more division. We want unity, and I believe that is our strength. Thank you.
A specific question for Reyes. Part of your campaign mentions helping students by giving them more access to things like food and hygiene access. What does this look like?
So food and hygiene access, we know, is a huge issue on college campuses across the nation. So what I hope to implement is over the summer, there was a food drive where you could simply drive up near the LSC. They would deliver a care package right to your car. It would have fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. I want to re-implement that in some fashion this fall so that students have access to fresh produce, which they normally wouldn't have access to, whereas the food pantries just have non-perishable items given the nature of the food pantry. As well as I want to increase fresh produce access as well as allergy access to students in the dining halls, students in the first year dorms, whatever it may be. A student came to me and told me that she couldn't live in the dorms simply because she had too many allergies. And that's unacceptable on our campus. That's not something someone should have to go through. So I really want to make sure that students have access to adequate food and nutrition, as well as hygiene products in the food pantries, as well as in the care packages, so that students don't have to spend their own money on basic essentials.
And a specific question for candidate Dykson is, representing all the voices of the student body is a big part of your campaign. What groups would you say are not being heard right now, and how do you plan to change that?
Great question. The groups that aren't being heard right now, I immediately think of the international students close to my heart. I met a girl named Lili. She might be watching right now, Lili Menayi. She's from Colombia. She told me about how she feels like the structure here is not set up for her to feel welcomed, engaged, valued, and supported. H-Wei from China said that he's in his 3rd year. He doesn't know if he's going to make it to the end of the year, let alone through this semester, before getting potentially kicked out of the country. And I know that's a question of a national political situation, but it's stories like that that we need to hear and we need to know. There is no limit to who may not feel heard right now, because as the system is built now, it's not built for you to feel heard. So I would say anyone who's sitting in the audience, I want to ask you that question. Do you feel heard? Because I understand that if we're not opening that door for your voice to be a part of the conversation, then we're failing in our role as student government. That's my commitment, is to you and to your story, whoever you may be and whatever your identities may be.
To circle back on that question, Dykson, how do you plan to change that?
Yeah, great question. So we're going to pioneer a concept called micro-legislation. Now, if you look at the setup as it is now, I'm curious, asking the viewers, how many of them know somebody in ASCSU? If you know me, you probably do, or if you know any of the individuals to my left here. The way that we plan to reform it is to give you a system that's simplified, right? Typical government bills, student government bills, are too long, they're too complicated, and they often don't address the root of the problem. And we understand that. We want to create a system where when you see a problem on campus, you identify a solution, you tell us how much funding you need, and it immediately becomes a reality. When you look at ASCSU Senate, $100,000, what is that? That's a common reserve. That's a resource pool, and those are student fee dollars, which means that every dollar should go back to the students. I recognize that and I support that. And if you go to our campaign page at Christian FOR Speaker, you can watch our concept video, Micro Legislation. It tells you all about our vision. We are changing from within.
We have a rebuttal from Reyes.
So I would say I agree with Christian. We need more access to student government, but we also need systemic and policy change. Students from the SDPS offices have repeatedly said they do not feel welcome in the ASCSU Senate space. Many of them have left due to controversies in the Senate last year. It was just a hostile space for them to be in. So before we can institute a micro legislation or a legislative change, we need to make sure that the atmosphere is good for all students, all identities, and that people are being represented fairly.
Alrighty, moving on
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. I think, and I do remember that when the senators brought that up, that they felt like it was a hostile environment in our Senate. And to be completely honest, that's why we took the position we did in our campaign, because we understand that if we don't know those perspectives, if we don't know the needs in our community, if we don't know how people are feeling in our Senate body, are they going to participate fully? And absolutely, we can do both at the same time. We can do both at the same time. Foster micro-legislation for those who don't know anyone in ASCSU, and change from within. There's no reason we can't do both.
Moving on to a question for all candidates. With your shortened term, what is your timeline on your initiatives? Let's start with candidate Hill.
So I've done a lot of things that are important to CSU. First thing I tried to do was get a flu vaccine incentive out to the public, to increase incentive for flu vaccines, which I was prepared to do, but a few of my colleagues, however, did not, sitting to my right of me, Senator Reyes, did not support it. And this vaccine was going to help everybody and anybody, and it was a phenomenal idea. Look, during this time, during pandemics, we need these things done. Unfortunately, that didn't go through. The second thing is I'm working on a bike bill to put security cameras in front of bike stands, and which will decrease by 50% bike thefts. And we're going to keep doing that. So thank you.
Candidate Reyes, would you like to rebuttal?
So I would just like to respond to the point about the flu vaccine incentive. What we had found is that the incentive, one, would not be able to continue into the next year. It was, one, too late to be implemented in the current academic year. Another thing was a lot of what happened would be unfair to those who are immunocompromised, those with diseases, those with allergies. I myself can't get the flu vaccine because I'm allergic and I could go into anaphylactic shock. And HIPAA concerns for students disclosing health information. So that would be a lot of what happened.
Hill, your rebuttal?
A rebuttal is this. First of all, we had to address the HIPAA concerns. We made it a system where we would have people put in their own information willingly on a sheet that was already addressed. Second of all, for those who are immunocompromised, it does not discourage them. In fact, it actually helps them, contrary to Senator Tristan Reyes' statement. By doing this, by having everybody else getting the vaccine, that small group of people, this is herd immunity, by the way, that small group of people who cannot get it will also be protected from people who have it. Thank you.
Would you like to rebuttal?
No, thank you.
Would you like to share your timeline of your initiatives?
So my time of my initiatives, one, open educational resources, which is essentially open source textbooks, I've already begun working on the state level. So there's legislation coming to the legislature this year to work on a grant program for open educational resources where textbooks would be mailed to you or textbooks would be emailed to you so that you wouldn't have to pay a cent for your textbooks on campus. Another one that I'm hoping to work on is immediately start on reinstituting food pantries, getting money for that, as well as ensuring that we're helping students.
Candidate Taddei, your response?
My goals align with efficiency. We did not have as many bills passed last year that were pertinent to the students. Truth is, more productivity equals more legislation passed, which means the students are getting more bang for their buck. Speaker doesn't make the policies, they empower those who do. Once again, my goal is to be efficient. Thank you.
Candidate Dykson, your response?
I would not underestimate the power of today. That's my, and not my political opponent. I mean right now. I mean yesterday. See, and that's my timeline. My timeline is start right away. See, because I understand that conversations that we're having with students out on the plaza, I mean, we talked with probably 200, 300 students over that entire week. Every single one of them challenged us in some way, were vulnerable with us in some way, were authentic with us, and shared their heart. And I understand that that is the power behind all of these ideas, right? My opponents are going to throw you ideas that sound pretty, they sound nice, they sound efficient, but at the end of the day, if there's no heart behind it, if we don't have you at the center of our story, then where is it going to go, and is it going to be successful? My commitment and my timeline is today, tomorrow, and this week.
Another question for all candidates. What is the purpose of your position and why did you choose to run for office? Let's begin with candidate Dykson.
Why did I choose to run for office? I mentioned the idea that stories drive change. And I mentioned, for example, one of the girls that we interviewed, Paula Mendoza from Venezuela. She might be watching right now. She shared about how her family sacrificed everything to come here for her to get a CSU degree. And that's an open door for her to be able to be here and to invest. She's a part of tons of groups on campus. It's stories like Paula's and the 6 other people that we interviewed. I understand that my role is not, it's not my face, it's not my voice alone. It is, I am a vessel for the stories of the people around me. That's what representative government is how can I speak on your behalf? And if I don't know you and I don't know your story and your need, I can't. That's my commitment.
Reyes?
I would say I started running simply, it started with not proud to be on campus. They demanded that ASCSU be more transparent, be more accountable, be more open to the students. There are students who have been protesting, who've been all across campus, posting on social media, asking for change on this campus, asking for systemic change to combat racism, homophobia, transphobia, all across the campus, in classes, with policies, just in general. And that's sort of the social climate right now. I'm running for that systemic change. I'm hoping to sit down with each SDPS office, with each community that needs assistance, and ask them, what do you need? They know what's best for them.
Taddei, your response?
I am here to chair a session that is transparent, productive, and beneficial. Bringing more light to ASCSU is something I'm very passionate about. I joined ASCSU in the beginning because I felt that there was a need for more dialogue, and I'm going to stay to make sure that happens. Thank you.
And Hill?
About 1 year ago, a tragic accident happened on the first day of school. A student who was in our OTC, a freshman student, can you just think about this for a minute. Somebody whose parents just dropped them off got hit by a car last year, a freshman ROTC. It's amazing. It's crazy. That's when I decided that I want to get involved in student government. It's time for change. It's time for us to get together and unify each other to get initiatives done. Which is also the same reason why I'm running for Speaker of the Senate, because I want to be able to solidify that unity and make sure that we have more people at our front office to come and ask, what can we do? How can we serve you? And that is what I want. Thank you.
Before we move on to our next question, just a reminder that student and audience questions will be answered in the second half of the debate after the 15-minute intermission. So if you want your question to be asked during the debate, feel free to send it in on the live comment link on YouTube. But moving on to the next question, this is a personal one for Hill, and that's going to be, your campaign has focused on lowering costs such as textbook and tuition fees, and how do you plan to accomplish that?
Well, first of all, if anybody's not aware of SFRB, the Student Fee Review Board is an important aspect of CSU. We have a good amount of power as students and student government to determine where student fees go and where that and where, what services they provide. Textbooks included. And, and basically ASCSU's already purchased a big portion of what textbooks cost. If you go to the library, you see that certain test booklets, it says funded by ASCSU. I want to increase that. I want to divert those student fees to textbook costs and to costs that you shouldn't have to pay hundreds or even sometimes thousands of dollars for. It's ridiculous. So by doing that, we can make sure everybody has an equal education, no matter who you are, because we are Rams. Everybody deserves one. Thank you.
A rebuttal from Dykson.
I agree with the sentiment. I support it. I think we should lower fees as much as possible. But I'm going to ask you to, I want to invite you into thinking, who is the person who's demonstrated that? See, because I can tell you right now, nobody who's on this stage has been on Student Fee Review Board except for myself. And I say that not to bolster my own resume, but because I believe in you, and I fought for you. And I knocked down 3 proposals that we had last year as one of the lowest fee increases we had in almost 5 years. And the reason is because somebody was willing to say, I stand on behalf of the students. I recognize that every penny counts. So I fought for you already, and I will.
Thank you for your response. A rebuttal from Reyes, and then a rebuttal from Hill.
So I would say yes, we need to lower textbook costs. We need to lower student fees as much as possible. I have already been working on a way to lower textbook costs. I've said it before, open educational resources. The state of Colorado has a grant program that I am working with the Colorado Department of Higher Education Executive Director on renewing through the state legislature. Those are things that are feasible, not necessarily through the Student Fee Review Board, which has to get approval from the Board of Governors to do any kind of decrease or increase.
Hill, your rebuttal.
Yes, my rebuttal to Associate Senator Dykson is that he is on the SFRB, as he said. However, our student fees still increased a little bit, especially during this time, during the pandemic, where we had to all go back in March, and we had 3 months of not going to the rec center, not going to the LSC, not going to this area or that area. And yet we still had to pay more for the next year, in which we're having half Zoom, half online. How is that fair? That isn't. So, yeah, thank you.
A specific question for candidate today. A couple questions ago, you said that your job is not to have opinions as Speaker of the Senate, and what do you mean by that?
ASCSU is an apolitical organization. My job is to support the people. I do that by making sure the senators can do their job as well as possible. My job as Speaker of the Senate is to moderate the meeting efficiently. Thank you.
A question for all of the candidates. How do you plan to enact your, a rebuttal for you.
That real quick. I just want to make it known that I agree. I think there's a role to not have opinions to the point where it blocks out other voices, but it was Malcolm X who once said that if you don't stand for something, you could fall for anything. I want you to know that that's the reality that we're living in. If you elect a speaker who says that we don't need to have opinions, that's not right. See, and I have opinions. I have opinions that your voice matters. I have opinions that you matter, and I will fight for your voice, and that is who you need as Speaker of Senate. Vote Christian.
A rebuttal from Hill.
Yes, rebuttal to today's comments is that I disagree. I think that there needs to be some objectivity within the speakership. However, the speaker also is a leader, and you can't be completely impartial if you're going to be a leader to lead people in the right direction. If you just you have to have some rule and order within the Senate to do so. And I think that as a speaker, as student government, we need to take on initiatives for the benefit of the campus. We can't be completely neutral. That is part of our problem, and that is why we haven't been getting things done. We need to take bold action to do so.
That's your time.
Thank you.
Hill, your rebuttal? Or not Hill, today your rebuttal?
Although I agree with all of you, I would like to remind everybody that this is policy and not politics. Thank you.
And Reyes, this will be our last rebuttal.
I would say that the Speaker of the Senate, along with the President and Vice President, sits down with President McConnell monthly to discuss student issues, to discuss priorities, and hand over legislation from the Senate. A Speaker of the Senate who does not advocate to the President of the university and have their own opinions, have their own at least policies and values that they want to advocate for, is not a Speaker of the Senate who will sit down with students and who will advocate for their needs. Thank you.
Moving on to a question for all candidates. How do you plan to enact your agenda? Let's begin with Dykson.
I think it starts by recognizing the role of the organization. Right, I mentioned this concept of you can have a cluster of politicians or you can have a group whose entire goal is outreach. See, me and my campaign team talk about the things that we don't know. It's things that you literally cannot comprehend. That's what we understand, is that our agenda is going to pave the way through a lot of darkness, a lot of things that we don't recognize or understand that we haven't yet defined. And what's the key to defining it? It's your voice. It's your experiences. It's the people who don't even know maybe what ASCSU stands for. I want you to know that your voice matters. My agenda will be carried out by believing in you and bringing you in, and more importantly, telling our senators how we can reach out to you.
Today, your response?
In previous years, the Senate has not been chaired with everyone's viewpoints in mind. I understand this. I want to make sure that A, everyone understands Robert's Rules of Order. I think this is just going back down to basics. It's super important. B, making sure that everyone has an adequate platform to be heard so we can empower those voices. Thank you.
You mind if I rebuttal for that?
Dykson, you may.
Just to point that out on, to make that a possibility, what candidate today just described. Last year in ASCSU, we did not abide fully by Robert's Rules of Order. One particular clause, part of it, is that you should have an affirmative and a negative and allow both sides to have equal weight in the conversation. Because if you've noticed how a lot of those conversation goes, it's 10, 15 people speaking against and it's one person for, and I can tell you that feels like climbing a mountain. My commitment is before I turn it back over to one side, I'll ensure that the other side is heard. That's the commitment I have in the Senate.
Hey, would you like to rebuttal?
Yes, that is why we have elections, so we can elect a better speaker. Thank you.
Reyes, your response?
So I would say the way I'm hoping to get my policies in place is through student voices, through sitting down with the SCPS offices, with the international students, with different communities on campus and asking them, what do you need from us? What can ASCSU do for you? As well as working on the national and state level with other student leaders and student governments across the state in order to provide a better higher education system throughout the state of Colorado, not just focusing on CSU, but allowing the state of Colorado to be one of the best higher education systems in the nation.
And Hill, your response?
My opponents talk broadly about unity and doing that or that, but they don't go specifics. We need to do, how are you specifically going to do this? Yes, reaching out to the students, perfect, but we've heard this line before, many years before. And we need to go specific. For example, for me, make a marketing website. Work with the director of marketing to promote ASCSU on the football screen, main screen that someone was working on. Finish that this year. Do that. Work on legislative to give more Senate seats like what I proposed for Greek life. Do that. Do these specific things. This is how we're going to do it. Not just say, oh, we're just going to have unity. That is important, but how? What specifically are we going to do it? And that is something that my opponents are not expressing specifically. Thank you.
Since it was just touched on, a specific question for a candidate today: how did educating yourself on Robert's Rule better prepare you for supporting the voices of the student body at CSU?
It all starts at education. If you don't understand the job that you are going to be applying for or participating in, then you really can't do the job well. My goal is to do the job well, work hard for the students. That is why I did what I did. Thank you.
Question for all the candidates. How are you going to manage your personal time in office, balancing classes and your involvements? Candidate Reyes, if you'd like to begin.
So as a social worker, this is something that I've learned through years of practice. It's going into a client's home, it's sitting down, hearing hard stories, which we no doubt have a lot of on campus, and being able to go home and separate myself and take care of myself. It's about scheduling. It's about having a calendar and sitting down and saying, what are my priorities for this week? Which students do I need to hear the most this week that have been underrepresented for years? And understanding that I do need to take time for myself and relax and be a student and be a person. But I also know that serving is about providing my time as much as possible in order for students to come to me and say, you know, here's what I need, here's what you can do for us.
Bill?
Look, thank you. As an aspiring neurosurgeon, you're going to have to take many different tasks of your life and put it all together at once. Learn how to gamble with them all. And that is something that I want to do, that I'm able to do right now. As a senator this year, I've spent my time being a senator, doing my classes, being in a very hard major, biomedical sciences, and hanging out with friends and being involved in a fraternity for some time. All these things are important to gamble, and that is no exception of what I will do if you elect me as speaker. I will promise you that not only will I serve you as my constituents, but I will make sure that I will get some private life as well, so I can come back to serve you later. Thank you.
Today?
My first priority is ASCSU, and it has been from the second that I walked through those chamber doors. I became passionate, I became involved, and I became inspired by every single senator, every single committee member that I came in touch with. It's incredible. So as for managing my time, well, ASCSU comes first. Thank you.
And Dykson.
I won't say that I value well-being. Everyone who's around me knows that. I value the well-being of others because I know if they can't bring their whole self into the room, then we're doing something wrong. It was H. Jackson Brown Jr. who once said that integrity is doing what's right when nobody's looking. And I would make the same argument for well-being. It's taking care of yourself when no one is looking. That's a commitment I have for myself and for the people around me. I'm an avid mountain biker. I love going out and going on hikes and things like that. And I understand that to breathe life into other people, you have to find moments that take your breath away. And that, for me, is being outside. So I invite people to join me in that. I'll bring ASCSU senators. We'll go hiking. Well-being is essential for me.
That's it. Thank you.
Another general question. How do you view ASCSU's role in the student experience at CSU? Let's begin with Reyes.
So the role of ASCSU is truly, as I've said before, to serve students. ASCSU has historically been closed off, not transparent, not accountable to students. Students have said this over and over again in the Not Proud to Be demands. It was something that was mentioned over and over again, and it's still not been met. ASCSU needs to be open to students. It needs to go into and say, you know, the SDPS offices, into the international student offices, into different clubs and organizations on this campus. We need to go in and say, what can I do? What do you need? And, you know, because as a social worker, one of our founding principles is that the client knows best, the communities know best. I don't know the best for those communities.
Dykson?
I think the role of ASCSU is, it's to represent. It's to be a pure representation of what is on this campus. Who's on this campus? 30,000 students. It's difficult to represent them all. It might even be close to impossible, but it doesn't mean that we can't strive for that ideal to truly and honestly represent you. And I do understand that if we don't know you, then that's just a dream. It's not reality unless we make it a priority as a Senate to know you, to know your story. So that's my commitment. I know that as a deliberative body, it must defend every voice. And that starts with the speaker. It starts with being an arbiter, and it starts with believing in who's in the room. I believe in you, and I want to support you, and I am asking for your vote and your support.
Taddei, your response?
As a student myself, I am inspired by my peers. I listen. But because I listen, I also know that most students here don't know what ASCSU does. That's a problem to its core. That needs to be changed. I would like to create more accessibility to ASCSU events. I would like to really encourage a community where people can come in and talk to their representatives and talk to their senators and get to know them as people. I think it's incredibly important. Thank you.
And Hill?
I believe that ASCSU is the voice of the students. We are the voice. Administration, Joyce McConnell or President McConnell, they are elected to lead the entire school, but there is a disconnect between the students and them. And it is ASCSU's job to bridge that disconnect, to put them together, to make sure that what the policies the students need or want can be met from the admin. And that is the job of the student government of CSU. And we are unique in that we have a lot of leeway in what we can do with our student fees and stuff. And I think that is important. And we want to bring unity, and we also want to advocate and make sure everybody knows who ASCSU is. Thank you.
Specific question for candidate Dykson. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but you say that your campaign promises the idea of micro-legislation. How would that be implemented, and how would it affect students and ASCSU?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, there are some internal changes. There are always hurdles to bringing about a good idea. With that said, there's the process of bringing in a bill. The concept of micro-legislation is when you submit it, it immediately becomes a bill. And at that point, we would have to adjust the Constitution a bit just to say that senators would have the choice to sponsor. The reason we designed it that way is because we understand that there are a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. There are a lot of roadblocks. There's a lot of red tape, and it's really hard to get a bill onto the floor in ASCSU. I don't think that's how it should be. Imagine if we passed 10 pieces of legislation in one Senate session, or imagine if we passed 80 or 90, each of them for small amounts of money that taps into that resource pool of $100,000, and it has real lasting change. That's the idea, is we want to democratize the access to legislation writing. There are changes both internally, but the goal for us is to allow your voice to be heard and for you to become the change maker. That's our vision.
Rebuttal from Hill?
Yes, I completely disagree with this, the concept of micro legislation. I believe that we are holding a couple $100,000 of student fees, and if we were just to pass it off, like flies, we could lead some without any checks and balances. We have a system where we go Senate to committee, back to Senate, and if we keep going back and forth, it brings checks and balances. And so if we just, irrationally just send it off the way, it's not really doing, it could be paid for something that doesn't matter. Thank you.
Rebuttal from Dykson.
Yeah, he reminded me of an important point. The system and the process stays the same. The bill gets there in ASCSU, guess what? It gets read, first reading, goes to committee, it comes back. But the difference here is you don't have to know someone in ASCSU to make your idea a reality. See, because once it gets there, I will fight for you. I'll fight for that bill. And that's our goal, is we know that if we can just get it through the gates, then we have a chance to pass it. That's often the hardest challenge, is getting it to that point. So that's where micro-legislation comes in.
A specific question for Reyes. You say the role of ASCSU is to better the community as a whole. We were wondering if you could provide some examples of what needs to be addressed and how you will address them in the short period of time you will have as a speaker.
So a couple of the needs that need to be addressed as a community is, certainly we've touched on this, systemic racism, systemic homophobia, transphobia. These are things that have been issues on campus for years. We've had Native American students who've had the police called on them simply for attending tours. We've had nooses in dorms. We've had the N-word written in bathroom stalls out on the IM fields. These are things that definitely need to be addressed on a policy level. President McConnell needs to be held accountable for her promises to the students that the RBEI, the Race Bias and Equity Initiative, is going to follow through on initiatives that will actually help students of color, that will help queer students, students with disabilities, that will help communities on this campus. The other part of it is I don't know the experience of every single student on this campus. I will go to each STPS office, I will go to each department and ask, what can we do for you? That's the only way we can make effective change for the communities on our campus.
A general question. The role as Speaker of the Senate is to be a mediator and act nonpartisan between the various viewpoints. How will you do this? Let's begin with Taddei.
As previously mentioned, ASCSU is an apolitical organization. It is important to have an open mind to everyone's viewpoints and to empower those, regardless of if you personally agree or not. Thank you.
Move on to Reyes.
So the way I moderate and chair meetings, I chair the Colorado Student Government Coalition. I'm already working with different colleges across the state, universities, private, public, community colleges, etc. That's a lot of opinions to juggle. The way I will implement that on the university level here in ASCSU is just being open and understanding that I, as the chair, might have a different opinion, a different viewpoint, but that doesn't change the fact that Robert's Rules of Order is what governs what we do. That doesn't change the fact that everyone has the right to be heard in the Senate chambers. That's a lot of what happens in order to make sure that everyone is heard, that I'm being neutral in the space.
Dykson.
I would say it's leaning in and recognizing the voices who often aren't heard. So I'm just asking, if you feel that way right now, if you feel like you're filtered, you're silenced, or you're not heard, I assure you that will not be the trend or the theme if you elect me as Speaker. I already mentioned how we can do that, right? Robert's Rules of Order, you pass a piece of legislation, or before you pass it, you debate on it. You ask, is there anyone in the affirmative? Anyone in the affirmative, going once, going twice, and you go back to the negative. If you can stick to that process of balance within the Senate, what does that do? It lowers the tension, it lowers the fear, it lowers the worry that someone is going to be attacked for their thoughts or their beliefs. Your voice matters. As the Speaker of the Senate, I will defend your voice.
And Hill.
ASCSU is nonpartisan. As Speaker of the Senate, it is good to hear both sides. Whether you are a Democrat or a Republican or whatever political affiliation you are, you have the right to hear both, even if you do not agree with it. That is important when making decisions. And that is something that we need, impartiality. This past year, it has been unfortunate that many people on one side of a political spectrum had left because they felt like they were being outnumbered. As Speaker of the Senate, that will not happen. We will make sure that people on both sides are there and are happy, can get things done, work together without, defaming them or cursing them or whatever. And if you vote for me, I will make sure that will happen and will bring unity back to ASCSU Senate chambers. Thank you.
Rebuttal from Reyes and then Dykson.
ASCSU, as we've heard, is not a political organization, but the inherent fact is we need to have shared common values that values each and every student for what they're worth. Justice on this campus does not mean equality. Justice means changing the system so that everyone can be heard, that everyone can be valued, so that I, as Speaker of the Senate, will understand that, yes, we might have people on opposing sides, but we still value students. We still understand that students are important, that your story is important, that my story is important. We're a community, and we have to act like that. We can't say that, I'm on one political side or the other. It's about people. It's about being human and having humanity for our fellow Rams.
And Dykson.
I would say that for most of us, we probably agree that as a deliberative body, the idea behind that is we trust that there will be opposing viewpoints. There might be very contentious disagreements. But I would agree that, and probably my opponents as well, if we can fight for the 80% that is common ground, like Tristan said, is shared values within that room. If we can fight and defend that part, if we can dwell there, that brings about enormous change, and it brings about a sense of unity within that space. And that's what I want to foster. And I know it starts with knowing Robert's Rules of Order, knowing how to maintain balance, knowing how to stay calm. And if you know me or we've interacted at any point, you probably know those are some of my strong suits. I want to listen more than I talk, and that's what a speaker needs to do.
And that is all the time we have for the first half of the debate. We'll now be moving into a 15-minute intermission where after the speakers will answer audience and student questions. A reminder that you can ask those questions via the live stream account feed on YouTube, and we'll see you right after the break. Welcome back to the 2020 ASCSU Speaker of the Senate debate. I'm Ren Wadsworth, your moderator. We will be moving into audience and student questions that you still can comment on the live feed comment section on YouTube. Moving into a question for all of the candidates, what is your favorite type of cereal? Candidate Taddei.
That's an easy answer. Honey Nut Cheerios. It is fulfilling. The milk afterwards is perfectly sweet, and it just makes me very happy. Thank you.
Candidate Reyes.
So I actually don't like cereals. This is an unfortunate question for me. But I do really like oatmeal, and pancakes are like my favorite breakfast item. So sorry about the cereal.
Candidate Hill.
I like a Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Sweet tooth. Guilty as charged. But I think that, it just tastes so good, especially after you eat all the cereal. The sugar left inside the milk is just, so good.
Candidate Dykson.
I'm going to go with Honey Bunches of Oats. It's fun to say. It tastes great. It's crunchy. Overall, it's a win, I'd say.
Just a couple of reminders as we move into our audience questions. Remember to keep your time to the time allotted. And the first question is for every candidate on the board. It's going to be, how do you plan to support Indigenous groups on campus? Candidate Reyes.
So to start, to support Indigenous groups on this campus, one is incorporating the land acknowledgement into every Senate meeting. It's something that is minute, but it really grounds us in understanding that we are on Native land and that we squatted to essentially steal this land from the Native Americans who are inhabiting here. Another thing I want to do is I really want to reinvest resources into the Native American Cultural Center, sit down with the director of that office and really say, traditionally we've had one, maybe two senators in ASCSU to support your voice. How can we increase that? What can we do to make sure that you're filling those Senate seats, make sure that we're supporting you in the best way we can?
Candidate Dykson.
Yeah, I would echo many of the comments that Reyes just brought up. I think the land grant is essential that we bring that up every Senate session. As a land grant institution, it's the foundation of who we are. It's the foundation of the ground that we're studying on and that we exist on. And I think it goes deeper than that, though. I think it's asking the right questions. See, because I understand that I don't have all of the solutions. I'm not going to pretend that I do, but I'm committed to asking the right questions. I'm committed to building those relationships, and I understand, like we've talked about, that stories have power, and the narratives that we tell are incredibly important. Raven Pinto is a mentor, friend, and inspiration of mine. Individuals like Raven, who are part of the Native American Cultural Center, what if we could tell her story and shine a light on the power of individuals like her?
Thank you.
Candidate Hill.
Where we're on right now was sacred land and is still sacred land. Who was once owned by the Native Americans. And I believe that by acknowledging through the land grant, having every senator maybe memorize it, and I would like it to be said at least once in every Senate session to appreciate what we have. Every time we look at each other, every time we see a friend, every time we go to a class, every time we buy a textbook, every time we eat on the dining halls, we must always think about that it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the Native Americans and what they have provided us. Thank you.
Rebuttal from Reyes and then Dykson.
I don't think it's appropriate to appreciate stealing land. It's not our place to say we appreciate a gift or this land that was taken care of by Native Americans for centuries. And so I think it's important that we recognize that as a starting foundation and continue to grow the Native American support on our campus.
Rebuttal from Dykson.
Yeah, I would agree. It came at a dire cost, and I know we agree on that, certainly. I think it goes further in terms of how are we engaging that community? The Native American Cultural Center. Raven Pinto was a part of the honors program at CSU, and her friend Brandon hosted a seminar workshop on how Thanksgiving is perceived in the Native American community. And I was the only one that showed up. And I stayed for an entire hour, and I asked questions, and I leaned in. That is where my heart is at, is I want to be with those people because I know that they can enlighten our understanding.
Your
Yeah.
rebuttal, Hill.
Yes, I'm not saying that, I agree with, Tristan Reyez that we should we shouldn't, it is inappropriate to appreciate what was stolen. This was stolen land from Native Americans, and it's really sad and unfortunate. And I think that we need to increase, Native Americans' voices on campus, giving them more Senate seats and stuff like that to appreciate, not just appreciate, what was stolen to us, but appreciate that they are a presence here. And I wanted to voice for.
Thank you for your response. Today, your response?
I think it's very important to acknowledge the fact that this land was given and the land grant, et cetera, so forth, but that's going to do nothing unless we give them the open dialogue that they need, right? We need to foster this idea, and I believe that if we have more people, recruitment, people from diverse backgrounds to go out and recruit people for Senate and to hear people's voices, it'll make much of a bigger difference than acknowledging a land grant. Thank you.
Moving on to a specific question from an audience member to Dykson. How do you plan to work with the other branches of the government and admin to uphold student initiatives?
To uphold student initiatives with the other branches, I think it's essential. I understand that there's two elements of development as a leader. There's the horizontal and there's the vertical. The horizontal is, are we building outward? Are we building new connections? Are we pursuing outreach? And then there's vertical development. Are we looking inward? Are we discovering what's within ourselves and how can we bring the best version of ourselves? I think those two come hand in hand. I know who I am. I know my roots. I know what defines me. And I have a curiosity to know what defines the other leaders in our organization. That is what's going to shape our interaction. And I think understanding their place and understanding our place is also super crucial for that. Knowing that the executive branch and the president is a figurehead, but also knowing that as the Senate, we're the hands and feet. We're the ones that make those ideas possible through legislation. And that's why we are pushing micro legislation, because we want every student on this campus to have access to legislation writing, because we know that's where change happens.
Another question, this one for Reyes. How do you plan to fund your food pantry initiative?
So a bill that was ran last year allocated $20,000 to the food pantry. This year, again, the budget has been copied over from last year. The Senate has $100,000, most of which we did not spend last year, to use on student improvements on campus, on things such as the food pantry. So I'm hoping to replicate that bill in some fashion, whether it be for $20,000, $10,000, $5,000, whatever we can do in order to support the food pantries, in order to support fresh produce and diet-sensitive items on this campus. That's something that we can do starting day one, is increase that support, as well as work with SLICE, work with other offices on campus, the president's office, to try and find additional funding to something that's so crucial on our campus.
A question from students for Hill. What tangible things will you do to create unity?
So this past year, there has been some disconnect with the executive and the Senate. We're going to work together with the director. We have a bunch of directors under the president's cabinet for a reason, to go out and fulfill certain roles and certain duties dedicated to what their roles are. And by having a senator pair up with a director to make it work, that would be something that's, I would be prepared to allow them to do. For example, if a bill related to health, I would send that person who writes that bill, pair them up with the director of health. That's what I did. I try to work with executive to get things done. It's partnership and unity that matters. If you have disconnect, it's not going to work. If you have disconnect, you're going to have two different opinions and two different outcomes, and it'll just fall apart. That is what I do not want to happen. So, thank you.
Another audience question for today. Another audience question from today. How do you plan to lead the Senate if you have never been a part of the Senate body?
I appreciate the question. Last year, I was the intern under Blake Alfred, the current Speaker of the Senate, who I hopefully will be taking over. I worked really hard with him. We got a lot of stuff done. But also, I was lucky enough, and I was raised with a mother who is very educated on Robert's Rules of Order. She's incredibly passionate about that. So at the dinner table, she'd be like, I motion a second serving of potatoes, as silly as that sounds, but, it really gave me a perspective on what to do inside of a Senate chamber. I would bring forth that energy, I suppose. And also, I have been studying really, really hard, working incredibly hard so that I can support the voice of the students. Once again, studying Robert's Rules of Order. It has been my best friend, so that's how I would do that. Thank you.
Rebuttal from Reyes.
I would say also on part of the Speaker of the Senate, it's not just about Robert's Rules of Order and ways to run a meeting that can be redundant, that can have endless tasks, endless rules. It's about understanding the rules and the bylaws of the Senate as they currently stand. Last year, I piloted a Lex to change the Constitution and the bylaws in depth to study them to make sure that we were already following policies and procedures that were already implemented in the Senate.
Dykson, your rebuttal.
Yeah, I would just add, to make these ideas a reality, we have to look at the logistics of it. So, for example, when you visit the ASCSU website, you find the legislation tracker, you find the Senate list. Often both of those are not updated regularly. I assure you, if you elect me as Speaker, that's going to be a primary emphasis that we apply on the inside. There's also the element of how do you engage, right, with legislation. Can you meaningfully comment, critique, and add your voice? That happens if we create a database where you can sign in with your EID and engage with legislation. We live in a virtual world, and we have to adapt.
That's time. Thank you.
Hill, your rebuttal.
I agree. I think that we do live in a virtual world today, especially during COVID, where like almost everything's online now. I think people are dependent on the computer and the internet for these sort of things. And legislation, my opponent is right. It's not up to date. It really isn't. So I would assign a specific role to somebody to specifically, with the sole task to keep it up to date. And that is something that we're going to do if you elect me as Speaker, to make sure everybody can see what we're doing. Thank you.
That's time. Thank you.
Jay, would you like to rebuttal?
I really appreciate my opponent's insights. I actually really, really do. I am new to this, but as a new face, I can bring an opinion, from the students. I haven't been in ASCSU as long as that they have, but that gives ASCSU a fresh opinion, and I think that's really important.
Alrighty, moving on, just a reminder to the audience members here to silence your phones to give the candidates their due time, and to the audience members at home, you can keep commenting those questions for the candidates to answer. Another audience question for all of the candidates is, how will you fight the consistent issue of anti-Semitism on campus? Let's begin with Hill.
Anti-Semitism is a horrific, horrible thing that is on campus, and I want to be there for everybody who is from Jewish faith or identify in the Jewish religion or culture. I want to stand by them and make sure that they do not have to worry about going around in halls or lecture rooms even, for goodness sakes, to see swastikas posted everywhere. It's ridiculous. It's disturbing and asinine. And it makes me cry into tears to see that, to hear that, oh, I witnessed this and I witnessed that. And I want to make sure that by working with them and working with administration to make sure that that does not ever happen. Thank you.
Reyes, your response?
So I would say, in order to help combat anti-Semitism on this campus, one of the primary things that we can do is educate. And that doesn't have to be on the Jewish students on this campus. The School of Social Work here at CSU offers a Dialogues Around Differences event every single month. It's been virtual since COVID has happened, but we've brought in speakers who were in the concentration camps. We've brought in speakers who have understood the sting and the pain of anti-Semitism. I don't know what that's like, but I would certainly sit down and talk and try to understand the pain that Jewish students feel on this campus when they do see swastikas, when they do see anti-Semitism and face it every day in the classroom.
Bill, your rebuttal.
Yeah, I get education is important, but I get tired of hearing over, the past many years, educate. We need to not just educate, but we need to do something about it. We have a student conduct code for a reason, to prevent harassing, bullying behavior. Why are people, going and doing these racist, anti-Semitic things not being held accountable? It's crazy. They should be suspended or at worst expelled for breaking the rule,
That's
contract
time. Thank
they
you.
signed. Thank you.
Reyes, your rebuttal.
I would definitely say that education is the foundation. If we can't talk about anti-Semitism in a way that's educated, that we understand the basics of what anti-Semitism is, how to be an ally or an accomplice with the Jewish students on this campus, we can't have those further conversations. We can't do something without that foundational knowledge. And I think that's something that CSU really lacks, is diversity education for those outside of the social sciences. And so that's something that's important to start with and continue on with action.
Dykson, your response?
Yeah, I think I agree. There's two parts to it. There's education, but there's also a more crucial part that's invitation. Are we inviting people into a space, into a culture of love and dignity and respect? Are we demonstrating that in the way that we interact, in the things that we stand for? For example, Eva Schloss came. She's the stepsister of Anne Frank. She came and she spoke at CSU. I was there at that event from the beginning to the end. Why? Because I understand that stories have power. I understand that stories can remind us what's awful about history and why we should never repeat it. Stories are what drive change, and I was there because I value stories, and I value your story. And all of the Jewish students on campus, you have a place in our circle, and that's why we're asking for your vote and your support.
Faye?
Truth is, cruel people are going to be cruel, and no code of conduct, no matter how precise it is going to prevent that. I believe it is important to give the proper resources to those students who might be struggling or hurting, and to encourage people to share their perspective and their story, and also to harbor an environment where diverse speakers are welcome. I think that could also help tremendously. Thank you.
Dykson, your response?
Yeah, I would just echo the same things I said for the Native American Cultural Center and the Native American students on campus, is that I don't know what all the solutions are. We don't know what all the solutions are, but I am committed to asking the right questions. So whether you be a part of the Jewish organization, whether you're part of Chabad or Sigma Alpha Epsilon Pi or Hillel or any of those groups, Rams for Israel, we support you and we believe in you, and more importantly, we want to talk to you because we know that you have solutions to the problems that our community as a whole is experiencing and seeing.
Rebuttal from Hill, and our last rebuttal from Reyes.
So I agree. I never said to not stop education. We need to do education to its fullest amount, as well as action. We need to do education and action. Uphold the student conduct. What's the point of having a student code of conduct that says, explicitly says, harassment behavior is, if you're going to be harassing or you're going to be bullying, you get suspended or you get some sort of reprimand. And I think that living up to that from the admin is what we need to work on doing. Thank you.
Reyes?
I would say that our ASCSU, or the Code of Conduct for CSU, has not been revised or changed with student input. Several years ago, when they revised the Code of Conduct, ASCSU had an email that reached out from the Student Resolution Center saying, what do students think about the Code of Conduct? And no one responded. No one was able to talk to them. It's important that we get the Code of Conduct updated to the fullest extent possible so that students who do commit crimes or things like that can be held accountable.
Question from the audience for all candidates. Are there any policies implemented by Speaker Blake Alfred that you would change? Let's start with today.
Not particularly, no. Thank you.
Dykson?
Blake is obviously a friend and a mentor, so I would say one thing comes to mind, the committee process. Revising legislation. If you haven't been a part of ASCSU, it's kind of a nightmare. There's a lot of things that can be cleared up, a lot of opportunity for efficiency. When a bill is sent off to those committees, it can stay there sometimes for an indefinite amount of time. There are edits that are made in each committee that don't align, and all of that brings down the organization as a whole because it makes it difficult for us to operate efficiently. That is one thing that I hope to define and change, is what is the role of a committee? How can committees be an avenue for students to bring meaningful change into legislation? And how can we make it as efficient as possible? So those are just some of the things that I'd say.
Reyes?
I would say that last year, Speaker of the Senate Blake Alfred implemented several, or refused or did not implement several policies in certain scenarios until it was convenient or until someone else pointed out something. It's important that we're advocating on a fair and equal basis under the rules as well as Robert's Rules of Order and the bylaws to make sure that legislation is being heard appropriately, that legislation doesn't violate the Constitution of ASCSU, doesn't violate university policy or anything similar, so that we can get legislation passed that's fair and equitable for students.
I think that ever since the COVID-19 outbreak, he has brought everything completely online, all the meetings and everything. Well, now we're back up on campus, and we have a hybrid model where we go mix in person online. He has refused to put things, to some component like in person, like for example, labs or in-person classes. We have it where we can have half the people come one day and the other half the next week and the next week. He has refused to do that. And he also has refused to, get this very request approved, despite me constantly, barging him on to do that. And I think we can't really serve our constituents if we don't have it some form in person. I think doing it safe and effective is the way to go. Thank you.
Reyes, your rebuttal.
I would say it'd be irresponsible to meet in person in any fashion in a pandemic. COVID-19 is a serious disease that is affecting universities across the nation, across the world. Universities are shutting down because they have too many COVID cases. Colorado College had 10 COVID cases. CSU has had 80 so far. That's not okay for us to meet in person and be examples to students to socially distance if we're supposed to be leaders, if we're supposed to be servants to our campus.
Dykson, your rebuttal.
Yeah, just to add on, well, slightly unrelated is the college council setup, right? If you look at ASCSU, it's about 50 senators from all across the campus. But the challenge is not all of them represent all 30,000 students or even all 60 departments or what we have on campus. And so one idea is this idea of proportional representation. From the College of Liberal Arts, I'm a political science major, but what if I were to be charged with representing the ethnic studies, the art department, the music and theater?
That's time.
Bringing that emphasis into the
Thank you for your response. Candidate Hill, your rebuttal.
As a rebuttal to what Tristan said, if we can have many classes hybrid in some form, we can do ASCSU. ASCSU is, I would say, part of administration. If we can meet in person, we have a variance request up to the state mandate, 25 to 50. If we meet under that and we all wear masks and social distance, it's fine. It's what the state allows. Dr. Fauci even said that we can't keep everything closed, right? We have to have some sustainability within it. Thank you.
Moving on to a question still from the audience for all candidates. Why is your agenda and policies the most tangible out of all the candidates on the stage? Candidate Dykson, if you'd like to begin.
Our policies are directed at serving students, at giving them a mechanism to make change on campus. Now, we talked about micro-legislation. I'd love to explain it a bit more. It could be as simple as a Google form and a QR code. As simple as you see a problem and we want to give you the tools to make change, to address it, to fix it, to solve it. We believe that happens through micro-legislation. So, for example, when you see a bill in ASCSU, it says, whereas, that's what's going on, therefore, what are we going to do about it? We want to add on to that, what is the Senate planning to do? What's the plan of action? That's another element of micro-legislation. It can be as simple as I was walking to Eddie and I saw a door that was broken. I want $200 to fix it. And we pass it in ASCSU, no hoops, no red tape.
That's time. Thank you.
Your change.
Reyes, your response.
I would say that I've already started implementing my agenda on a statewide level. Open educational resources, open source textbooks is something that's already feasible. The Community College of Denver has piloted their whole first year as open educational resources. Students don't pay a single cent for textbooks their whole first year. That's something that can be modified to be on this campus. It's something I've been talking with the executive director of the Colorado Department of Higher Education on. The food pantries already exist. That's something that can easily be brought back in partnership with the LSC, the Slice Office, with the Food Bank of Larimer County. There are other things like COVID-19 relief that we can easily accomplish within the budget, as well as just supporting students and listening and be there to be their servants.
Hill, your response.
Yeah, I would respond in saying that I think my agenda was already started as well. Since I became senator, I think that me writing bills to actively, for the students. For example, the bike theft issue has been horrible. Once I had my bike stolen twice in 1 week $1,500 lost. If that happened to me after only 1 year, I can hardly imagine how many other students that has happened to. Security cameras with signs that posting security cameras research have shown to work, according to the CSU PD and the university. Many universities decrease 30 to 50%. That is my agenda. What students want, what the individual tasks and different as a whole, put it together. That's what students want. That's what we're going to do.
Thank you.
Today, your response?
My agenda is realistic, it is tangible, and I don't make promises I can't keep. I work for the students, not for myself, and I value policy and not politics. I value you. I know that there are plenty of people at this table who would do an amazing job. However, at the end of the day, you want someone who's reliable. Thank you.
Another question from the audience for all candidates. How will you uplift voices as the Speaker of the Senate? Hill?
So, as the Speaker of the Senate, I will create an environment where everybody is welcome. We already have, a Senate when it was in person. That's why it was harder to do this online, because it wasn't as accessible to other students as it was before the whole pandemic. That's why there needs to be some form of in-person, I think. But going off of that, I would want to invite everybody, any student and any community member is welcome to come to ASCSU. Speak their voices, give maybe longer times for gallery input, work on, fixing it to where it's more, the community friendly, make it trustworthy, make it more to the students. That is what I want. Thank you.
Today?
At the end of the day, students, they really need to be involved. But, students aren't going to want to join a Zoom meeting. Let's be real here, I'm a hardworking student. I have hours of work to do. And to join a Senate meeting on Zoom and just to watch, it's not realistic. It's not a realistic ask. We need to do something more for the students. Thank you.
Reyes?
I would say, in order to make sure everyone's voice is heard, there are students on this campus who are already making their wishes known by protesting on the Oval, by protesting and marching, by protesting outside the administration building. There are students who are already saying what they want. We had over 600 students come to a Senate meeting last year to voice their opinions about systemic racism on campus. That's something that we need to learn how to tap into, to be able to ensure that those students who are at the front and center of those movements, who are at the front and center of those communities, are being heard, are being valued, not just being diverse as a buzzword, as a promise that we can't keep, and understanding that we're here to serve them.
Hill, your rebuttal?
I would disagree with what Taddei had, said, that nobody's going to want to come to ASCSU. I really think that if students want to, they will come. We had, in this exact same room, we had a Senate meeting where almost 900 people of marginalized identities from the entire state of Colorado. I talked to a few people. Some of them were from Trinidad, for goodness sakes, which means that it is feasible, it is accessible. We have the trust of the students, and we need to build on that, and that is important. So I think that is...
That's time. Thank you, Bill.
Today, your rebuttal?
It is accessible, but it is not accessible enough. There is no incentive to come and talk. People don't know who we are, they don't know what we do, and they don't know why they should be involved. That's an issue. There are so many other ways to address this issue than a link to a Zoom call. Thank you.
Dykson, your rebuttal?
Yeah, rebuttal to Reyes and Hill, or not necessarily rebuttal, just to add on. At that Senate session, hundreds of people there. I remember Janae Matthews. Anyone who's watching might know her. She's incredible. She's a spokesperson for a movement. And I remember she came that night and she said, I usually don't share with people who aren't going to listen. And I remember she confided in us. I remember she trusted and she shared. That was a heartbreaking night for me. I remember I was writing people's names down, just frantically trying to capture it.
Reyes, our last rebuttal.
Students shouldn't have to come to ASCSU in order to be heard. I would say the most important thing is that we're going to students. It's not necessarily that they should have to show up in hundreds and hundreds of students to a Senate meeting. It's that we should be sitting down with the communities. It's that before that Senate meeting, when there was a meeting of people who were going to be presenting, I went and sat down and spoke and talked about the legislation and informed people about the process. Those are things we should be doing as preemptive measures.
And Dykson, your response.
Thank you. I think when you visit, I would actually ask you to do that. Visit the ASCSU website. Tell us what you think. What is the experience that you get? Does it say something like join ASCSU, or does it say we want to hear your story? Is it a photo of the cabinet and of the Senate leadership, or is it a photo of Laurie Student Center on a busy afternoon? What is the message and the narrative that we're telling? That's a commitment that I hold. I hold a commitment to you, and I understand that as Speaker of the Senate, you have to demonstrate that you want to uphold student voices.
Another student question, should ASCSU defund campus police? Let's begin with Dykson.
We live in turbulent times right now. There's no doubt about it. No doubt that we need change and we see it coming. See, I understood when I saw that the Black Lives Matter was having a rally the other week. I went with my campaign coach, Kevin Clark. Why did I go? Because I believe that every person has their own motivation, their own heart behind why they do things, why they march, why they fight for justice. What does that mean? I wanted to go and experience it. I did it because I want to create an environment of love and respect and dignity. So to answer the question, I would say we should clarify what are our intentions, where can those dollars go? Let's imagine and let's paint the picture of what is the environment we want to create on our university campus. Is it investing into the back office, into the SDPS offices as a whole? What does that look like? And I'm open to that.
Reyes.
In short, yes. The CSU community has made it known that they want those resources to go to the SDPS offices, that they want it to fight food insecurity, that they want it to support the community of students here on our campus. I've been working with the Colorado College Vice President of Outreach on a committee that they have to institute a public option for community security so that students are helping students through situations rather than bringing police into situations where we know that they arrest and ticket people of color, of marginalized identities more than any other population. That's something that we can already do, and we can separate from the CSU PD and rely on Fort Collins PD.
Your rebuttal.
Yeah, just something that's been on my heart. I feel like what we need to clarify is what we want, and I'm sure Reyes and I agree on this, what we want, not necessarily what we don't want. And I know there's a lot of nuance to unpack there, but the idea is let's paint the picture of where we want our funding to go and what that could be before saying things that we don't want. Let's argue for what we do want to create, for where we want those dollars to go and what we envision from that, what the result would be, because that is how you get campus-wide buy-in for an idea.
That's time.
You have to paint the vision.
That's time.
Thank you. Your response, Reyes?
I would say the students have made it perfectly clear what we want is justice. They want people to be able to experience this campus in a way that is no different from their peers, in a way that makes them feel valued, feels heard, feels respected, and their identity is affirmed. And defunding CSU PD is one step that they've already made clear that they want to take. And so I'm fully willing to work with those students to get that done.
Today, your response?
It is not my job to give opinions. It is my job to empower those passionate voices who can. I listen to our community, and that is how I plan to implement positive change and justice. Thank you.
Hill, your response?
Yeah, I agree completely with my opponent, Senator Dykson, what he said about, diverting, not so much as like diverting, funds, but more like, looking at what our funds are going to. Reform of what is, right? I believe we need some form of law enforcement. But whether it be the CSU PD or something else, we need to evaluate the ways and mannerisms they do things, right? And if it is defunding them or giving more funding or whatever, that's what I will look at doing, depending on what they're doing to the community and how they're treating people. Thank you.
A specific question from students for Reyes. What policy initiatives do you have outside of just diversity/SDPS office policies?
So something I think I want to be really big on and really key on is going to President McConnell and saying, this is what students want. I've said that already. Also, I want to make sure that we have a code of conduct that matches with how students want to be on campus, that we have housing and dining students who are properly trained to interact with people of color, with queer students on this campus. I have heard over and over again from those in housing and dining that inclusive community assistants only go so far in hosting events, that RAs, that residential directors, that professional staff haven't been trained properly in order to validate people's identities who are living on this campus, who call this campus home. So that's something I really also want to implement. I also want to implement the diversity training through Everfi, which I have already personally taken. I think it's a great foundational start, but also looking into the requests of having an AUCC diversity requirement.
Candidate Dykson, a student wanted to know, what is micro-legislation, and can you expand more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're curious about the whole context, at Christian FOR Speaker Instagram page, we have the full concept video there, but I'll give just a snapshot. A student named Max Hutto came to me. He's a freshman in Allison. He asked me, what if we put food trucks on the IM fields and let students use their meal swipes? And I started thinking in the back of my head, what if we partnered with Rams Against Hunger? What if we gave those meals for free to students who were food insecure? And from that one idea, ideas were unraveling. That's the idea behind micro-legislation. We understand that there are problems that we face, and we understand that you are the eyes of the campus. So if we can build a system that gives you the power to make change, that's how we find success. We know that you have solutions to problems we all face, and we want to give you a mechanism to make that change. And we want you to have an avenue to accessing that $100,000 budget to make your idea a reality, even if you don't know anyone in ASCSU. That is what I will create if you vote for me for Speaker.
Your rebuttal, Reyes?
So micro-legislation sounds great in concept, but implementation is definitely going to take time. Any policy is. But something that we can do is something we already have. The Board for Student Organization Funding supplies student organizations on this campus with money to travel, with money to host events. A similar program can be implemented for small budgeting processes. The Senate meetings are already 2-3 hours long, and so for students to have to go through that is just not long enough, is just not short enough.
Question specifically for, your rebuttal.
I would just say, yeah, the reason those Senate sessions are 2 to 3 hours long is because we're debating 10 pages long bills, right, of pieces of legislation. The idea behind micro-legislation is there's not much to debate. That's actually the idea behind it, right? If a student says, I was trying to walk into Eddie and the door was broken, or students who are demanding ADA accessibility, if that's not met, I would see a unanimous vote in the Senate. And that's the idea, is we want to agree on what we agree on, and we want to give students the access to make that change.
Thank you, Christian.
Specific question from the audience for candidate Hill. What policy initiatives do you have for the Senate structure?
I think it needs to be reformed in a way that will be more feasible to the students. I feel like this past year it's been more towards, what can I get? You know, Senator, what can happen to me? What can I get? Am I going to get this or am I going to get that? I think it needs to be more student-friendly, in my opinion. I think that by, making, as I said before, get long Q&A, set more gallery input, larger spaces for people who want to come, more like, for example, as I said, putting an ad in the football game or something like that, in basketball game, to see what would we do. That is important. I think by, us collaborating with each other, collaborating and talking with each other. Like, if somebody doesn't agree, make a whole group chat, make something more virtual, create some. We don't have that yet. We don't have a complete. We only have individual committees. And there's been senators who sometimes pit each other. That is going to stop under a Kyle speakership. I promise you that. So vote for me, and we will give you more to you.
That's time. Thank you, Kyle.
And an audience question for today. What are your actual policy changes for ASCSU, specifically for changes within the Senate, and how will this affect students externally?
I think my biggest one is to increase communication, whether that be with us or whether that be with the administration. It's incredibly important to give students the access that they need. I work for the students, and I'm not afraid to take on concepts that others might be afraid of. Once again, I think we should increase communication with oh goodness, sorry, I have a little bit of a stutter. Administration. I think we should listen more, and I think Ms. McConnell should email less. Thank you.
And another question for all candidates from the audience is, how will you keep the Senate internally on track? Hill?
So I would keep, efficiency is key in doing this. Like, for example, putting our legislation updated, like to the day, to the letter, every day, making it more accessible. Keeping it on track means, not staying, singing a song, for example, for like a whole hour, or going off of a tangent for a whole hour or something. Get to the point, finish it, next. Have everybody a chance to speak. 5 minutes, you speak, 10 minutes, you're done. Don't having to go back and forth. Make sure everybody puts in what they need and immediately before, have it structured in a way that's you can keep going, not be redundant. Redundancy, it will not work.
That's time. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
Faye, your response?
I'm sorry, what?
Your
I
response
apologize.
to the question, how will you keep the Senate internally on track?
Holding people accountable. Reminding people that it is important to hold to your morals. Thank you.
Reyes, your response?
I would say it's definitely, again, accountability, but making sure that we're following the rules in the Constitution, in the bylaws, in Robert's Rules of Order that have already been put in place to make sure that students are being held accountable when they're holding positions of leadership. There have been times where senators have missed multiple meetings in a row, and the Constitution says that they should immediately be removed because they're no longer representing students. That's something that we should definitely keep implementing and continue to actually hold people accountable. Another thing is saying no. Simply being able to say, this piece of legislation shouldn't be on the agenda simply because it has no relevance to students, it's outside of our purview. That is something that we can do.
Hill, your rebuttal, then Dykson.
I would say that I disagree with what Tristan said about, getting rid of legislation if it doesn't, pertain to the students, because that could easily be, but what you want. It could be intertwined with what you want. And if you think what they think pertains to the students, you should let them do it. It's a democracy. We should do this. It's a representative democracy, and I believe that is important. But I do agree, having everybody come to meetings, holding them accountable. If they don't come to meetings, have a meeting one-on-one with them.
That's time.
Make
Thank
sure
you,
they do
Kyle.
it. Thank you.
Dykson, your rebuttal.
Yeah, I would just add that I think the efficiency of an organization is determined by the organization of the person overseeing it, the Speaker of the Senate. Are they personally organized? And I can tell you that is a priority in my life and everything that I do and the way that I respond. I love responding to emails. I'm timely when I'm responding. It's things like that that trickle and have an impact within the organization. It's the fuel that keeps it going. So that's my commitment, is to be a communicative and an available leader for
That's
you and
time.
for anyone
Thank you,
who's around
Christian.
me.
And Reyes, your rebuttal.
So the Senate last year, the legislation that I wrote, adopted cabinet bylaws that outlined specifically when legislation can be removed. It was something that was voted on by the whole Senate and was agreed to. That process would allow the cabinet, the speaker, the chairs, as well as the speaker pro temp and the parliamentarian to fairly and equitably adjust the agenda so that students are being fairly represented.
And Dykson, your response to the question.
Yeah, to the original question. If you don't know who's representing you, it's hard to feel heard and represented. Now, I mentioned the Senate list with all of the senators' names. It was not updated last year. We had so many changeovers of seats, and that's foundational. If you don't know who's representing you, then how can you be truly heard? It's prioritizing things like that. It's prioritizing the way that we look at our organization as a whole. Office hours, for example. It's when all the senators get it together in the ASCSU office. Obviously, it'll be digital now. What if we called it outreach hours? What if their entire goal of that time that they spend weekly is to meet and discover stories that they don't know and problems on campus that we haven't yet imagined? That's how you keep an organization on check
That's time.
and on
Thank you,
track, is by
Christian.
looking forward.
That's time.
Thank you. Your response, Hill?
I agree. I think that what Senator Dykson said, that we need to look, at the website, make sure it's on track. But under me, we're going to hire somebody in particular to make sure that is up to date. It's more likely to happen if you have somebody that's their sole duty, is to look at one aspect. If they look at that entire list and say it's not up to date, they'll do that and they'll get paid to do it. Incentive works. If they do it, it will happen. Thank you.
Your rebuttal, Dykson?
I would say there's no reason to have two people do one job. I understand that every person that we hire is your student fee dollars at work. So with that in mind, efficiency is having the commitment to restructuring, having the commitment to changing job titles, which is one of the primary responsibilities of the speaker, is to define the job titles of the senators and the associate senators as it relates to the Senate. So what does that mean? If we can pioneer that, and we can create that and make that, emphasize that in what we do, then we'll save you dollars and we'll save and we'll protect your voice.
That's time. Thank you, Christian.
And that is actually all the time we have for questions for the candidates, so we will now move into closing statements from each of the candidates, beginning with Taddei.
I first of all would like to thank you for your time. Thank you for standing by my side and hearing me speak my mind and my thoughts. I really appreciate it. Once again, as a recap of my campaign, I am transparent, I am committed, and I am efficient. Vote for me, and I can promise you will see those things happen and achieved in the CSU Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Taddei. Candidate Dykson, your response or your closing statement.
Yeah. President James Buchanan once said, the test of leadership is not to put greatness into humanity, but to elicit it, for the greatness is already there. And I want you to know, and I want for my entire team to be able to express our commitment and our belief in you, your power, your ideas, your solutions. We are building our campaign on the stories of other students, the people who have defined this university. And that's our commitment. It's not my face or my voice alone. I am a vessel for the stories and the experiences of those around me. If you follow us, if you vote for us, that is what you will be electing. Follow us on social media, @Christian FOR Speaker on Instagram. Give a shout out to Ava McCall, my campaign manager. We would love to have your voice heard. We want to hear your story. Reach out to us, and we'd love to have you in our circle.
Thank you, candidate Dykson. Candidate Reyes, your closing remarks.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this debate today. And really, all I want to say is what separates me most from the rest of these candidates on the stage and why you should vote for me is I have tangible, actionable policies that have already started to be implemented and that I can further within the role of Speaker of the Senate. I have advocated for students on the university and the statewide level. It's important, yes, to listen to your voice, to sit down and go to you and say, you know, I'm listening, I value you, you're important on a human level, and it's important to have vision, to have tangible policies that can actually affect students and make their lives better. I would say that's the main reason you should vote for me for Speaker of the Senate.
Thank you, candidate Reyes. Candidate Hill, your closing statement.
Thank you. I would like to first say thank you to everybody who's taken their evening to come and watch this debate. This is a pivotal moment in CSU's history. We have a pandemic in our hands that has forced everybody to go half online, half in person. We have partisanship, and we have, Black Lives Matter, and many racial discrimination that is still occurring on campus. I want to be that candidate to get things done this year, to work with whoever the student body president or vice president may be, to make sure increased representation and increased unity occurs. I don't care if you're what color you are, what gender you are, what political affiliation you are, whatever you are, you have the right to be heard, because this is what America is. We are a democracy. We are one, and we are all one. We are one whole. And that is what I want to do. Vote for me, for Kyle, and we will make sure that we will finish U+2. We will get Greek life on campus.
That's time. Thank you, Kyle.
And we'll get that done. Thank you.
And that concludes the 2020 ASCSU Speaker of the Senate debate. You can tune in tomorrow on YouTube to watch the presidential debate, and you can vote the 14th, 15th, and 16th on RamWeb for both the Speaker of the Senate, the Vice President, and the President. Thanks for tuning in.